All right, this is Joshua Harrell. I'm sure you've already kind of caught on to that because of the channel name. But this is just a quick stream and an answering, okay, to a question I got on Quora, and that is, do vampires exist? That's a really good question. My answer to that is yes, in many forms and in many ways. But how? And what's the true explanation as to how they exist? What's the proof that we have? What can we say that can make others more aware of their existence? And that's what we're going to be doing today. So, really fast, I'm going to go ahead and open up this real quick. And hopefully, you guys can still see me. If not, you'll see what I'm seeing here and what I've already answered. So, let's go to the original question. Do vampires really exist? And there are a few other answers on here. One of them says, no, they don't. With the exception of some other species and insects, arthropods, and several species of bat, there are no animals whose entire diet can or does consist of consuming blood or sustenance. Besides not providing satisfactory nutrition to large-sized animals, consuming blood could allow blood-borne pathogens to be transmitted to other beings, causing them to become ill or die. And this is technically correct. However, it does not say that they actually only survive on blood. Of course, they only have a craving for blood, but nowhere in any vampire story that's ever been based on factual evidence even says that they can only survive on blood and blood only. Um, that's preposterous. Um, and pretty much, um, well, the best way I could answer this question myself, okay, as one person, would probably have to be that, well, they exist, but not in the way in which we think. Okay, that's probably the best way I could say it. Um, the way that they exist is in, like I said, different forms, but overall, um, it's wait just a second. I'll just bring this up here. So, what can tell us if they're real? Um, well, of course, they are real as most of the mythological. Just because you don't or haven't yet seen them doesn't mean that they don't exist. What I'm trying to say is that there are many perceptions and views, opinions on vampires that don't actually make sense or even add up to any proof at all. However, that's why people like me are here. First things first, and that is you need to understand these things to understand how to find them. And the first thing is a question: what is a vampire? And the answer is vampires are a mutant offshoot of humanity. The vampire race, as it is known in the modern times, descended from an ancient Sumerian, known as in the present as Drake, or past as Dagon. Though he was first a vampire-human cross species to exist, Drake was born in the pinnacle of the vampiric evolution over the millennia. The other vampires sired by Drake de-evolved as their bloodlines were diluted as they bred with humans. Now, Hominis nocturna, as it is known, has become almost exactly like the vampires of myth and fiction, though the truth is likely that modern vampire fiction is based on the actual vampires at their current genetic standing. A Dagon. A Dagon was the progenitor of the vampire race, Hominis nocturnae. He terrorized humankind for the moments of history that were known as the Dark Ages. Spreading his cursed blood all over the world, according to legend, he was born around 5th or 4th millennium BCE, at the cradle of civilization itself, in ancient Sumer, Mesopotamia today. He was worshipped by the Babylonians as Dagon, and as the centuries passed, he eventually became known as Dracula, or Dracul, the Impaler. Later, he became disgusted with the world and retreated to a tomb in Iraq to sleep through the coming ages of his life. So, that's pretty much the modern breakdown of vampires. Okay? So, where do vampire myths actually come from in the present media? Well, from the 16th century and onwards, myths regarding Dracula filtered through Western culture, leading to Bram Stoker and him to write the famous novels bearing his name in 1897, and in the 20th century, through the mythical version of Dracula, entered popular culture in the form of various motion pictures throughout the world. However, the story of real vampiric entities doesn't stop there, so I suggest looking into original species which later evolved into modern day known as vampire-human cross species, or vampires. So, what is the origin of all vampires? What species evolved to become into this Hominis nocturna, or vampire of today? Well, that species would be known as the Upir. The Upir are a type of dragon or wyvern-like beings with a bipedal human-like form that feeds off of the iron within humans and goats or animals' blood. However, they allegedly, by mythical accounts, must die by their own hands to awaken their true powers, or supernatural abilities in this case. The Upir are also the most feared of the supernatural amongst ancient native Romanians because of their never-ending thirst for human and animal blood, and their 3.5-inch fangs, which can retract on neural command. That means with thought. All they do is think about it, and their teeth can retract. And their extremely sensitive and strong ability, known by the ancient Romanians as hypnoza, or as we would call it here, hypnotis. And hypnosis, or hypnotism, is the ability in which they possess, allowing them to hypnotize humans on command, as well as other species not listed here. The Upir is like a vampire, in that they both feed on blood, however they do not need it. The Upir can feed on any blood, and doesn't need the iron within the blood to sustain itself, like a vampire. A full Upir is half witch or warlock, and half Obrith demon. An Obrith is a type of very specific demon. If you would like to know more, look into the Obrith. A half Upir is half human, 1/4 witch or warlock, and 1/4 Obrith demon. If a child, infant, or spawn of a Upir is born with a cowl, then they will also become an Upir. Whether they will be full on Upir is not yet known, as many have not survived when studying such beings. General information below is to note, though. The Upir's appearance. A Upir cannot be distinguished from regular humans, in that they seem to be the same as humans in their physical appearance, although, except when feeding, They can dislocate their jaw much like a serpent or snake, since they are part supposed reptilian or serpentine, whichever it be. Life and rebirth. For a half or quarter of their life Upir to become full Upir, they must die by their own hands. Suicide. So when Upirs cut off their tail, say, they will bleed out and die and resurrect into a full Upir, if they're only part Upir, like human Upir. When Romans had slit his wrists, he had also died and was resurrected a full Upir. When becoming a full Upir, their supernatural powers seem to become enhanced, they become physically stronger, and their mesmerizing power becomes stronger as well. That's not it either. Like I said, there are many different subspecies and variations of this species, one of them being the Opir, which is Upir with an O. A vampire species found in the Ukrainian mountains, which is quite similar to the Russian legend of the Upir, but is different in one way. It consumes large amounts of fish due to it being a dragon as described above. A serpent or fish could also be an explanation, as a lot of people say that the Dagon is a fish man. There's many variations, even such as a human-like dragon species, as shown above. However, this name is also used for vampires in some regions of Czechoslovakia, or for bad spellers, I'll spell it out wrongly and easy for you, Czechoslovakia, or simply the Czech Republic. Anyway, the next are the Upir, with a Y. This one is one of the most common vampire species in Russian lore. The beliefs on this particular vampire vary from region to region, but the stories are most developed in Ukraine and in White Russia. The Upir is an incredibly bloodthirsty vampiric being, one that prefers to prey first on children and then on their parents. They have teeth like iron, and they use them to gnaw on anything that's in their way, like when their hands are trapped in the frozen earth during Russia's freezing winters. Like Polish vampires, sunlight doesn't harm this vampire. The Upir wanders during the day, usually from noon until midnight. When attempting to destroy this beast, it is said that one should hook thread to one of the Upir's buttons so that it can be tracked back to its lair. Once discovered, the creature should be drenched in holy water and then staked in the heart. Only strike it once, for stabbing it twice will bring it straight back to life and will be more fearsome than ever before. In other regions, it is believed that the Upir devoured its victims' hearts, and to kill it, you either chopped off its head or burned it alive to ash. There are also the Upior, or the Upir. It's pretty much the Upir of the Eastern Slavic name for vampire. A word used in most of Poland. Like the Upir, it rests during the night and preys on its victims during noon and midnight, and is recognized by its barbed tongue and its incredible love for blood, its thirst. Its legendary thirst. It doesn't simply feed on blood now and then. The Upir sleeps in it, drinks it, and literally explodes when it is staked, kind of like the vampires you see in the series True Blood. To kill an Upir, you must either stake it in the heart or decapitate it. It was said that to protect yourself from an attack by one of these, you mixed vampire blood with flour, baked a kind of blood bread with it, and then ate it, and supposedly they would not come near, because they would think you were one of them. Last but not least, we can't forget the Upor, a Belarusian vampire. The vampire species known for riding horses and its ability to transform into other beings. And, well, that's about it. But if you want to find one of these beings bad enough, then, well, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe look into the dark net. Or, not to be mistaken with the deep web in this case. The dark net, or deep net, is the dark net on its own thing. Um, and it's the most darkest part of the internet. I'd recommend using Tor with Tails extension, a VPN, and VirtualBox with it. However, I'm not promoting the use of the dark net, and I warn you that the dark net, not the dark web, not the deep web, not the deep net. Okay, the dark net is only twisted, gross, gory, illegal shit. So be forewarned, I would not go there. If you do go there, certain legal penalties you might have to suffer as a consequence. But that's just my personal opinion. If you would like to know any more on the vampires, there is something more I can give. And that is more of a scientific explanation into the matter. Okay? And this would be down. Here we are. Suave, predatory, Count Dracula, demonic-looking Nosferatu-like beings with glittery but conflicted Edward Cullen-like vampires take many forms, but a thirst for blood and an aversion to sunlight tend to be their defining characteristics. The word vampire or vampire is first appeared in English language sometime in the 18th century, but their origins go back much further. The forerunners to the modern-day vampire can be found in ancient Greek and Mesopotamia folklore, as you can find myths on demonic blood-sucking creatures in cultures all over the world. There's a Puashin in Chile and also Jiangxi, China, and the Babio Sith in Scotland, and the list goes on. There's plenty of places where they still talk about vampires, and they still very much believe in their existence. Most of us will agree that vampires aren't real, at least we thought. Still, in most cases, this is some fact to the fiction. One of the things that has been linked to true vampirism and a blood disorder would be the blood disorder called Let me see if I don't butcher the name here. Erythropoietic protoporphyria, or EPP. EPP is the third most common type of porphyria and most common to occur during childhood. Sufferers are extremely sensitive to light, to the point burning and blistering when they're exposed to certain light. Literally will burn and blister. So people with EPP are chronically anemic, which means that they feel really tired and look very pale with increased photosensitivity because they can't come out in the daylight, says Barry Paul, an MD of the Dana-Farber Boston Children's Cancer and Blood Disorders Center. Damn, a lot of words. Even on a cloudy day, though, there's enough ultraviolet light to cause blistering and disfigurement of the exposed body parts, ears, and nose. A modern-day patient would be advised to stay indoors during daylight hours, and they may be prescribed blood transfusions with sufficient heme levels to reduce symptoms. But back in medieval and ancient times, before medicine, they might have turned to animal blood and only come out at night to try to relieve symptoms on their own. Now, a study published in the Proceedings sorry about that. Get back to that. Now, in a study published by the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, I can't believe I said that way. Researchers report a newly discovered genetic mutation that is responsible for EPP. It is some type of very rare phenotype retrovirus mutation in the genetics for the people, suggesting a biological mechanism behind the vampiric myth. The newly discovered mutation really highlights the complex genetic network that underpins heme metabolism, says Paul, a co-senior author on the study of loss of function mutations in a number of genes that are a part of the network can result in devastating disfiguring disorders. Aside from it being a fascinating explanation for vampirism, the researchers hope this insight can lead to therapies that correct the faulty genes in people with EPP. If you guys liked this explanation as to whether vampires are real and if they do exist, which I very much hope you do, like and subscribe, and I'll be trying to do a little bit more of a professional video next time with an intro and outro. Have a good one, guys, and as always, keep learning.